We've got new information. This is the case out of Florida, of course, involving those classified documents. Probably the longest case in all of the cases involving President Trump, because you've got classified documents, you've got a number of Presidential Records Acts, a number of different laws that come into play. And Jack Smith doesn't like the fact that Judge Cannon in this case went to both sides, the prosecution and defense, and said to propose a jury instruction that she would then kind of mold into one instruction for the jury that they would ultimately get. And Logan, Jack Smith doesn't want the Trump defense team to have any role in this, but he specifically got angry with what instructions they would like to include.
I think we have to really break this down, because I don't think anyone really can understand what we're talking about here. We need to first go, yes, this is the classic case. This is like the original, one of the original cases you've heard about for years.
Right.
This is
the raid on Mar-a-Lago.
This is the raid on Mar-a-Lago. This just takes time. All of these things take a lot of time. So maybe you can explain to us in a bit more layman's terms what's happening right now. So they're going up there, and now there's an argument over who gets to hear the rules or what rules get to be presented.
As you are preparing to select jurors, and you've gone through the grand jury process, so you're getting closer and closer to a court date, you have to come up with an instruction for the jury. What is the jury looking to find in this case while they sit there? So what is the prosecution saying you did wrong? What is the defense saying they did not do, or that it wasn't wrong what they did? So currently, right now, the proposed instructions would take into account the President Trump's view of the Presidential Records Act, which dictates how records created during a president's term must be handled and later archived. And that law does allow for some records to be considered personal property of the president, even some of the classified records. But the Smith team says that would distort the trial. They don't want that at all. They want it only based off the fact that he took national security documents, which we don't know that that's the case, that was all that was found, nor does the judge at this point, because we know that there were thousands of documents taken. Some were given back. Others are being argued about. They still will be argued about. But I want people to understand here is that this is more lawfare. If you were in a criminal situation, okay, and the judge was saying, okay, to your attorney, put forward your idea for a jury instruction, and they're going to go to the prosecutors, put forward your idea for a jury instruction. They're going to mold that together to be as fair as possible to both the prosecution, but especially the defendant, because that's who is actually most protected in the American court system, is the defendant, because you're innocent until proven guilty.
Everyone's heard that before.
So if you took out your entire defense from the jury instruction, which is, do you believe them on this? Do you believe that they believe this? Imagine if they can do this to you, that the only jury instruction would be that you're guilty because you did X, Y, and Z, and it doesn't give another option for the jury. That would be, again, it's ultimate lawfare. It's absurd, but it's also been part, Logan, of this attack on this specific judge because she happens to be a Trump nominee. It's like, because she's a Trump nominee, she has to be disqualified. And that's why, again, we're going to keep explaining all of this to you, because this has huge impacts on how the case moves forward. And this is the case that will take the longest. If President Trump wins election, this case may never happen. Because, once you're sitting president.
It can go away.
Right.
Yep. All right. So you can support the work of the ACLJ right now at aclj.org. Have your gifts doubled. Again, we're giving you more information about that coming up.
Some people think champions are born, that it's a title that requires something only a handful can ever possess.
There are times in our lives that we are called, every one of us, to step up and serve a cause greater than ourselves.
Even when the loudest voices in the room say it's wrong, that it can't be done. It can be a difficult stand, but it's one any of us can make, including you.
You can be the change. You can make that difference.
You can be a champion. We cannot do what we do without you.
By becoming a monthly donor, you can become a champion of life.
A champion of liberty, a champion of freedom.
Please join us. Become an ACLJ champion today. All right, welcome back to Seculo. And we are taking your calls on this because, listen, we know these are complicated legal issues when you're talking about jury instructions and the outrage of the jury instruction and, again, the back and forth here. But you can understand how important a jury instruction is because that's what the jurors first hear is you're here to decide whether or not you believe A or B. Do you believe that, for instance, that President Trump had this right? Or do you believe that ultimately you're going after the trial and you've heard all the evidence that you believe that he did not have the right to take these documents or some of these documents? And Jack Smith tried to delete the fact that you could even find that he had at least the right to take some of them, even if not all of them, or all of them, because the law is kind of gray when it comes to the Presidential Records Act. So I think, again, this is the case that is going to take the longest because it involves classified documents. It will certainly not, I don't think there's any way this case comes to a full conclusion before the November election, which means it may become null and void. But that's why Jack Smith is pushing so hard, because a number of his cases have been delayed by the U.S. Supreme Court, by other cases, by local cases out of New York, by the AG, by the DA. I mean, think about how Alvin Bragg you don't hear as much about. I think he's just back in again on some issues. And the fact that, we'll get to it later, that the President Trump was right, as most of us said, that he was not going to have to do $500 million plus, and Letitia James lost, and it was about $140 million. It is covered, and he's got the bond, and no one's seizing his assets.
And what we're seeing now is the poll numbers either not change or positively affect President Trump. Now, I don't put a lot of credit in these polls. You're talking about a handful, sure, a few thousand people that are polled. But right now, one of the news stories, and they're covering everywhere right now, is that Trump is leading Biden in 6 of the 7 swing states. Now, it is close. And I think no one is going to take back that this election at the end of the day will be close.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear from folks who are in these states. I'll name them for you. It's Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, North Carolina, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. If you're listing in those states right now, if you're a voter in one of those states, but you're traveling right now. So if the race was just between Biden and Trump, there was no third party, which we think there will be RFK, but that still remains to be seen if he'll qualify in all those states. Trump is up 5 points in Arizona. That's a little bit above the margin of error. In Georgia, it's very close, just +1 Trump, which we know Georgia is going to be a super battleground as of now, though I think depending on the economy and how Biden kind of proceeds with his campaign, that could also change significantly. He benefited a lot in Georgia on COVID and the ballots, the drop-off ballots, all those kind of things. In Michigan, this is an interesting one. It's still within the margin of error, but it shows Trump up 3. And again, these are the kind of states that Donald Trump won that changed the electoral map in 2016. These were almost impossible states for presidential Republican candidates to win. They would try hard. They would work hard. They'd sometimes get close, but usually by the end.
Very union-driven.
But he's done well
liberal,
them.
More traditional liberal states, because he's not coastal liberals.
But he's done better with the populism message, even with union voters. You go to North Carolina again. Trump now up 6 points. That's outside the margin of error. Nevada up 4. That's outside of a margin of error usually, or right on the edge.
Yep.
And then you look at, Pennsylvania, which again, if you pull off Pennsylvania, Florida, Ohio, and those are earlier in the night states, I mean, you're on a pretty good track to being elected. And he right now with a 4-point lead. Again in Pennsylvania, and that's a 3-point lead in Pennsylvania. In Wisconsin, you've got a dead tie at 46%. Wisconsin, of course, we know, it's a difficult state. It's got even more liberal. But what I think is important here for Logan is like what you said, with all that he's faced, with all the negative attention, that people are realizing this is a complete 100% lawfare attack on President Trump, pulling out all the stops to try and hurt him in court, financially, legally, and almost kind of throw him off his game. And instead, voters are responding saying, this is disgusting that you're doing this to a leading presidential candidate, one who I may not even have loved, but now I'm thinking, you know what? You guys hate him so much. There must be a reason why, and I want to know why. And I think it's because he's willing to actually take you and that DC establishment on like he did the first time and pay the consequences like he is doing right now.
And that may be one of the moves. We're going to talk about the RFK run later in the show, because that may be one of the things where people get so turned off by the Biden administration that they may not be on board to vote for President Trump, but they aren't going to vote for Joe Biden. And where could their allegiance go? Someone who at least they feel is not the Biden administration. So that'll be interesting. I'm going to be curious. Phone lines are jammed right now. We have a couple open. But when we do get to that segment later in the show, what your thoughts are on the RFK run as it stands right now. He had a lot of heat, kind of cooled, and then all of a sudden, people are talking. And these poll numbers are actually showing a pretty interesting fact, which is he is pulling an equal number or close to an equal number from both President Trump supporters or Republicans and Democrats. Yeah, depending on the state, obviously. But he's kind of said that when they've asked him in questions, they've said, hey, do you think you're going to poll more Democrats or Republicans? He's like, I think I'm going to poll somewhere like kind of equally. And the numbers right now are showing that. So that's going to be very interesting as we head towards November. The last time we had a true spoiler like this would be, or someone you consider to be a spoiler, which he may not be if he's polling equally.
Right.
But you have, obviously, our mind goes to a Nader or your mind goes to Perot. That's really the only two times that's happened. Perot had some real consequences.
Yeah.
Nader, maybe not quite as much.
Right. You want to go to the phones, Logan? 1-800-684-3110. Let's go to him.
Yeah, Jamal is calling from North Carolina. You're on the air.
Hey, Jamal.
Hi, guys. Thank you for what all you do. God bless you all. I'm calling from a swing state, but I've called probably last year, and I mentioned how the extreme left pushed me away from being a Democrat. Yeah. And I think that's when you guys are leading tickets to say how far they've gone from the common voter. One thing I told the screener was about you all's radical left section of your webpage. I know guys in my camp have been looking for a source to find out what all they're doing. So I just want to say to all your listeners out there, if you're looking for a good database, a good resource to find out what the radical left is doing against us, against Christians, against good common American people, go to the J Secular website and go to the radical left section. Look that up. Has all a lot of information that'll be good for you all to have, and also don't forget to donate to J Secular team. Appreciate it, guys. God bless.
Thank you so much. We've encouraged people. Yeah, it's ACLJ.org. I've always said this when we're doing our pitches: is you got to go there and look at all the incredible free resources we provide. News articles, people, issues, petitions, ways to get involved, and just arming you with the facts and information you could use. I want to thank you, Jamal. Jamal calls from North Carolina. Another place that's interesting because I think you probably get a completely different vibe based on where you are geographically within that state.
Right.
There are probably pockets kind of like a Florida or even, heck, in most places have major cities, but I think North Carolina is even separated even more than that, which is districtly almost you have probably what would be far right areas and very left areas, and then probably there's somewhere in between. So it's probably hard to be on the ground in North Carolina and really be able to feel what's happening. If you're in Tennessee, sure, you may be able to say a Nashville, a Memphis. Those are going to go, the actual cities are going to probably go for a Joe Biden presidency. But we all kind of know everywhere else in that area is going to go Republican or going to go conservative. North Carolina, it's kind of like spots throughout.
Yeah, it is. It is spots throughout. It's not just all based off big cities and rural, because you've got some rural that's kind of like mountain town, leftist, kind of hippie-ish. Right. And so you've got that going for you, as well as kind of conservative business people in some of the bigger cities, like a Charlotte, where you got a lot of banking and things like that.
And then big education in a lot of these places. You have
when you go to those
universities, the Raleigh-Durham, Winston-Salem.
Campus, right. I mean, again, it's one of those states that it was not really a swing state, but the Democrats have turned it into one based off demographics, and so it's one we have to take extremely seriously. It's like Georgia, which was not considered a swing state. Georgia used to be a state where all you needed to do was win the Republican primary, and you were going to win statewide.
Yeah, even if the governor or even if or a senator was not necessarily always guaranteed to be Republican, it seemed to be that the presidential candidate was typically.
Yeah, and right now, if you're the Republican, if you were a gubernatorial nominee or Senate nominee, you're almost guaranteed to win there. Yeah, like we saw that with Stacey Abrams, just totally fell apart.
Couldn't do it.
So it's something with the presidential race that it also changes the turnout. Especially amongst minority voters. There's a lot more push to go into neighborhoods where people don't vote as often. and make sure that they vote either early or through other processes that Republicans have got to make sure that we do. And part of the work that we're doing at the ACLJ is fighting back on that election integrity, and we've been working on it with members of Congress since the last election on putting forward the correct legislation to correct the wrongs of 2020, and we've had some success there at the state level and at the federal level. Right now, we've got 18 cases against the Biden deep state in federal court. We've got 12 pending at the U.S. Supreme Court, including one that is a cert petition that the ACLJ would be arguing. So, I mean, we've got a ton of work at the ACLJ. We want you to become an ACLJ champion. We're only 175 short, Logan, of our 21,000 goal. So go to ACLJ.org, become an ACLJ champion today. We'll tell you more about it when we come back, but we need those champions to be the tip of the spear.
Life, in its essence, is built of moments, experiences, and connections that define our existence. It is a journey filled with opportunities for growth, learning, and the formation of relationships that enrich our souls. Life is precious because it offers the chance to make a difference, to leave a mark on the world, however big or small. It is a gift that demands our attention, care, and reverence, encouraging us to live fully, love deeply, and leave a legacy of kindness and compassion for future generations. At the ACLJ, we choose life.
All right, welcome back to Seculo, and it is great to be joined by a senior member of our team, a senior counsel for global affairs, former CIA director and former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, to work through these issues with us when we talk about what is going on, again, with internationally and even domestically as well. First question I've got for you, Secretary Pompeo, is you've got a great new article up at aclj.org that exposes the corruption at the border and how our taxpayer dollars are funding it. Can you explain to folks, I want them to check out the article at aclj.org, which just posted on Friday, it's brand new, but explain to the people watching and listening to the show how that's happening.
Well, thanks for asking. It's an important issue because I think everyone listening and watching needs to understand that it's their money that is now aiding these illegal migrants to come into our country. It happens through a complex web of international organizations, charities, human rights organizations, but in the end is coming through grants that come from the United States Department of State. To get into the weeds a bit, the International Organization of Migration is a UN organization that says they're for humane migration. But the truth is they're providing cash payments, interest-free loans to help migrants make the journey from South and Central America to the U.S. southern border, prepaid credit cards. This is crazy stuff. And the underwriter for that UN organization is the State Department, the Bureau of Population Management. So U.S. taxpayer dollars ending up in the hands of illegal migrants coming across our southern border. This is ludicrous. This is dangerous. And I hope that the American people will demand that President Biden and his administration stop using taxpayer money to fuel the illegal migration flow into our country.
Again, check the article out. It's aclj.org from Mike Pompeo, because, again, it just shows you how there's all these different ways these groups are taking money to affect what's happening in this corruption at the southern border, which also explains why they don't want to solve the problem at the southern border, because in a kind of gross way, they're making money off of it. Second question to you, Secretary Pompeo, is to make that worse is that we just don't know who's coming in. So are we funding a national security threat against ourselves? I mean, that's what it feels like. We're funding a threat against ourselves because we have this total lack of knowing exactly who's crossing in, and then they disappear inside a very large United States of America.
Jordan, we've talked about this a little bit before. So when you think about the fact that there are now some 6 to 8 million people that have come across our southern border in the last just handful of years, and we don't know where they are, nor do we know who they are, nor do we know if they just came because they truly just want a better life or because someone sent them. We can see that they're originating now in China and in places that are adversarial nations. There's going to be a bad day, Jordan. You can write it down. Even just a tiny fraction of that number of people are bad actors, folks who come here with dangerous intent. Even if it's 1% or 2%, someday we will wake up and find that we have permitted, and indeed, as I described earlier, we have helped fund illegal migration into our country in a way that presents a terror threat and a threat to our republic. The national security risk associated with folks coming into our country, some of whom are already on our terror watch list, some of whom we've not yet identified, is very real and very serious and absolutely growing each and every day.
Secretary Pompeo, obviously I follow you on all social media platforms, and I saw an interesting post on X that you gave that read, sort of like this: Biden has listened to the loudest voices on the radical left, the pro-Hamas wing of the party, and now the administration is negotiating on Hamas's behalf. I just kind of want you to elaborate on that, because that is obviously quite an accusation, if you will, to a lot of people. A lot of people go, okay, well, maybe that's going too far, but I have a feeling you have a reason of why that's not going too far.
I'll give you just the last 48 hours. The Israelis conduct a strike, and it tragically kills innocent civilians who were there to try and help feed folks in Gaza who don't have enough protein, enough food. That's a tragedy. It's the President of the United States goes out and said that he can't understand how this could happen. But of course, we all know that when you have an aggressive attack on Israel and they have the duty to go crush the folks who killed over 1,000 Israelis, that, mistakes happen. It's complicated. And as hard as we tried as Americans when I was a soldier and our military does today, this kind of thing just happens in conflict zones. And yet the President of the United States goes out and says, oh my gosh, the Israelis are doing this in a way that is indecent. The negotiations that are taking place to get back those hostages, the negotiations that are taking place to have a resolution to this conflict, you have now empowered Hamas. You have actually generated leverage at the negotiating table for terrorists funded by Iran. There's no other way to describe that, but other than to say that the Biden administration is now conflicted. They are now, they want Israel to be safe and sound, but they're not prepared to tell the Israelis, go finish the task of actually accomplishing that. And so in the end, they're negotiating to help this government, right? Hamas would consider itself the government of Gaza. Well, I consider them terrorists who raped and killed young women and children. And we ought not be empowering them, encouraging them, and defending them when, in fact, every civilian death that takes place in Gaza is a result of what they did, what Hamas did, what Iran did, not what the Israelis are trying to achieve to provide security not only for themselves, but create a set of living conditions in Gaza that one day can free Palestinians and Arabs living in Gaza, in addition to make sure that Israel is safe and secure.
We got a call coming in, and I think we wouldn't usually take one with Secretary Pompeo, but I think it's right on point with Joanne in Ohio on line 3. And Joanne, you're not talking to just Jordan and Logan, but also Secretary Pompeo. So go ahead with your question.
Thanks for taking my call. I'm honored. My thing is after the Afghanistan debacle, the withdrawal, Saigon, whatever you want to call it, didn't we intentionally target a man and kill him and his family who happened to be an aid worker? We apologized. We said we would investigate. I've never heard any results of any investigation. Why is this any different? I mean, these things happen, just like Secretary Pompeo just said. I mean, we targeted that man. This wasn't even a targeted thing. We're talking out of both sides of our mouth, and it's frustrating.
I believe that instance, it was someone it was a mistake. It was an error. And of course, we did apologize. There were things that happened that way.
Pompeo, this is the horrors of war. I mean, it's why you do everything you can to prevent war. But unfortunately, sometimes, like after an attack like October 7th, war is the only option. And when you go to war, mistakes do happen because it's human beings conducting it.
Yeah, it's a great question. And her core point, that the hypocrisy of the Biden administration calling out the Israelis for what was clearly a tragic accident is readily apparent. No, the United States, not just in Afghanistan, but in Iraq, during World War II, right? When conflict takes place, errors happen. People think they see things that they didn't. They target things that they didn't understand. Our efforts are always to do three things. One, do everything we can to possibly avoid that, but also make sure we have rules of engagement that protect our servicemen and women as well. Second, we want to go, if we figure out we made a mistake, we want to own the mistake. The Israelis have said, yep, we screwed up. We made a mistake. I'm sure they're both heartbroken, saddened, and apologetic. But, they've got a real mission to continue to prosecute. And then finally, we as the United States should be very careful about throwing stones. We do our level best every day. We fight in a way that is decent, consistent with all the relevant resolutions. We do it right, but we know too, there's always risk when you're conducting warfare, and civilians that are in a conflict zone know that they're in a conflict zone. These folks sounds like they did everything they could to stay out of harm's way, and sadly, there was a tragic incident.
Secretary Pompeo, it's always great to get your insight on these tough questions like that, and also on the politics of war, unfortunately, and what we're seeing now from the Biden administration moving closer and closer to what is an anti-Israel position, or trying to have it both ways, which is, again, I want to remind people we have Secretary Pompeo on our team because of our ACLJ supporters, Logan.
Absolutely. I do want to encourage you, go to aclj.org, read that new article. A new post come up from Secretary Pompeo all the time. But yeah, we weren't able to do any of this without your support here at the ACLJ. So we encourage you, go to aclj.org. I also wanted to take a quick second and talk about an update in the Garrett O'Boyle situation. Yes. That is something we got about a minute and a half here.
Garrett O'Boyle was suspended without pay. He is an FBI whistleblower that we represent, and our case has been able to proceed. And we have just filed our merits brief at the D.C. Circuit in a defense of our client.
Today.
So, again, today. That has just been filed today. I just want to make sure you understand that. So that case, as you know, we've been talking about for months, but we first had to file it at the administrative court level. But after you do it there in Washington, you jump to Court of Appeals, and that's where we are now. So that brief is there now, which means after briefing, we will get a trial date. And this is to protect American whistleblowers. Both sides of the aisle, if they see something wrong, they should be able to blow the whistle without fear that they will be fired without pay. And his security clearance has been revoked, which means if he tries to get another job in the intelligence private world, he can't because he's lost his security clearance. So his effectiveness, ability to provide for his family has been severely limited, and we are able to represent him like we do other clients at no cost.
At no cost. We can't do it without ACLJ supporters like you and ACLJ champions. We broke huge records last month. Hit over 20,000, 20,500, 20,800. Brand new people that said, I want to be an ACLJ champion, someone that supports the work of the ACLJ each and every month. So our goal now in the next few days, we'll have 175 people. That's how amazing you are to get to 21,000. So become an ACLJ champion today.